Welcome to Sanibel and Captiva's original podcast, The Insider's Guide to the Islands. I'll be chatting with island experts from fishing guides to shellers to local personalities. I aim to get the insider information to make your island experience incredible. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Rachel Rainbolt, the Development and Education Coordinator from the Clinic of the Rehabilitation of Wildlife, or CROW, as it's best known on Sanibel. Welcome, Rachel. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well, and thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about how you ended up on Sanibel, or working on Sanibel.
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually a Lee County native. My parents, my mother and my father are both transplants from the Midwest, respectively, but my sister and I were both born and raised down here. So I probably learned how to swim before I learned how to walk, and Sanibel was just kind of an easy transition into doing that. Shelling, fishing, a little bit of everything.
And how did you find yourself at CROW?
Well, at one point I did think that I wanted to pursue veterinarian medicine as a potential option for a career. And so after I graduated college in December 2011, I was accepted into the student program there as one of the fellowship positions. So after my 6-month term was up, I was brought onto staff 2 weeks after that, and the rest is history.
Oh, fantastic. So let's dive right in about CROW. I mean, tell, if you haven't been to the island, how would you explain what CROW is and what it does? And
Well, our mission's kind of a mouthful, but we are a teaching hospital and visitor center dedicated to saving wildlife through state-of-the-art veterinary care, research, education, and conservation medicine. So essentially, we are one of the nation's leading medical facilities for wildlife care. We admit anywhere from, on average, 3,500 to well over 4,000 animals a year, with the hopes of getting as many of them back out into the wild as possible.
Wow, that's quite an undertaking.
Yes. In addition to doing the hospital and treatment component of it, we also function as, a teaching hospital. So for future wildlife care professionals, they could come and live on site on our campus and work alongside our licensed professionals to become experts. And then finally, we also have an on-site visitor education center, which local visitors and even residents can come year-round and learn about our patients, their stories, and what they can do to help prevent some of those wildlife injuries.
Fantastic. And then, so explain a little bit about, I mean, it's CROW goes along with the island. It's been here for, how long's it been here?
Well, 50 years, actually.
50 years,
Yep.
Okay.
As of January, we are now in our 50-year anniversary celebration. So it actually was founded by island resident at the time, Miss Shirley Walter, and she has since moved out of the area. But one act of personal responsibility turned into an organization. So after that first bird she helped, 500 animals were brought into her home in that first year, and it grew from there to
500
now.
in 1 year?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
It spread like wildfire on the island, for sure.
So how many veterinarians have you got at CROW?
Well, we have one paid veterinarian. So Dr. Heather Barron is our hospital director and our head veterinarian. She oversees all of the general patient care, the student teaching, as well as any clinical research projects that we participate in. But in addition to Dr. Barron, we also have 2 year-long veterinary interns, which come to learn about wildlife medicine as a whole to pursue a boarded certified specialist.
Gotcha. And I'm sure they're going to get a wide variety of different animals being on the island. I mean, give us an idea of the types of animals that you get in.
Well, conservatively, we treat about 150 or more different species a year, because we treat not only native wildlife, but also migratory wildlife. That'll be a combination of birds, mammals, and reptiles and amphibians. But we do treat more birds than anything else in a year. About 60% of our annual caseload is avians. Shorebirds, raptors, so pelicans, osprey, eagles, roseate spoonbills, double-crested cormorants, you name it. You see it on the beach, we're treating it in our hospital.
Okay, and I'm sure there's some obvious things, I'm sure there's incidents with cars, I'm sure there's fishing line incidents, but what else are they coming in for?
Well, this time of the year, we're getting kind of 2 main things, one of which is going to be brevetoxicosis or red tide poisoning. Red tide is a seasonal naturally occurring phenomenon. We do see it anywhere from November all the way through till about the end of this month. So if any island visitors or residents happen to see any birds at the beaches having ataxia or kind of head tremors, or if they're walking around as though they're very, very dizzy, those are some of the symptomatic effects of this toxin. And then the other reason why we're getting a lot of birds in this time of the year is now it's springtime, so it's baby bird season. And I know at least me growing up in the area, I was always told that if you touch a baby bird after it fell from the tree, mom and dad wouldn't want it anymore. And come to find out, after my starting volunteering at Crow in 2010 and then moving forward, we've been very active in trying to teach people how to appropriately re-nest or reunite these babies with their parents.
So you can put them back in the nest?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
And if you find that the nest has been destroyed or tampered with, you can actually construct an artificial or faux nest that mom and dad can still use until the babies are big enough to fly on their own.
And they will come back?
Yep. We started a re-nesting program in 2012, and since then, the community has actually helped us prevent the abduction of more than 3,000 babies, and we've had over a 90% success rate of the parents coming back and taking care of the young.
Wow. So just going over back to the types of animals, obviously we've got tortoise, we got... that we see the traffic brings the island to a standstill when they want to cross the road. And then we've got birds that use the road as their own crossing ground and everything.
Yes.
But give me an example of the different species that we're getting on a regular basis.
So at least on the island, we definitely get a lot of gopher tortoises. We get eastern screech owls, tons of pelicans, great egrets, snowy egrets, double-crested cormorants, anhingas, just kind of a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. Like I said, if you see it at the Ding Darling Refuge, on any of the SCCF trails, or on our beaches, we treat them.
What about coyotes or anything like that?
So coyotes, because they're not technically a native species, they are not treated at our facility. Our licenses focus on animals that are either native or migratory to the state of Florida, and that's all permitted through us through Florida Fish and Wildlife.
Gotcha. Okay, what can you? So you said you have a visitor center, a visitor education center. Tell me a little bit about that. What's in there and what is there to go and see? And
absolutely. So that's kind of my wheelhouse. So I oversee all of the public programming within the center as well as out in the community. On site at our visitor education center through the end of this month, it'll be open Monday through Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. offering daily presentations at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And then after April, so essentially May through the end of December, will be open Monday through Friday. Same hours, 10 to 4, but presentations will be offered once a day at 11. Inside the Visitor Education Center, we have a various amount of different interactive displays. We have our Children's Discovery area, our very popular Be the Wildlife Veterinarian area. We have live animal exhibits contrasting native versus invasive species, live feed cameras into some of our hospitals, and then other interactive displays that help tell our story. The presentations that are offered in the center kind of focus on different animals that are treated within our facility. We do species profiles, again, invasive animals. We do patient profiles like gopher tortoises, possums, sea turtles, and then we have a couple of kind of overview presentations in terms of Wildlife Rescue 101. If you see something, how do you help? Or why animals come to Crow, sort of the overview presentation of everything.
Gotcha. And then if you did give us an idea of what is the protocol if you do see an animal that's in distress either on the side of the road or on the beach, what should people do?
Absolutely. So the first thing we recommend if anybody happens to find an animal is you call Crow. So we are the professionals, and we understand that many people, if they come into contact with a hurt animal, they may be anxious, they may be wanting to intervene, but not actually knowing what to do. So definitely call us first, because we have a rescue hotline that is active to the public 365 days of the year. So that means regardless of what day of the week it is, what holiday or what religious observance is going on, you give us a call. When you call in,
and what is that number?
Area code 239-472-3644. Okay. When you call in, you will speak with one of our wildlife admissions specialists. In many ways, they're a 911 operator who is trained to deal with a wide variety of emergencies. They go through a consultation with you and then help you proceed with how to move forward, either by leaving the animal alone, how to safely contain the animal, or notifying us where the animal is so we can dispatch one of our rescue volunteers to get it from you.
Wow. Okay, cool. And then tell me a little bit about the animal ambassadors.
Absolutely. So in an ideal world, we would love to be able to release everything that comes into Crow. However, that's not always the case. So for us, if we come across an animal in our care that is clinically stable, like they're healthy, they just have some kind of physical abnormality where they can no longer take care of themselves anymore, they go through a very strict evaluation period to see if they would adapt well to long-term captivity. If they would, we go through that initial training period with one of our certified wildlife rehabilitators, as well as Dr. Heather Barron, to be an educational animal ambassador. If we have the space on our property, we'll keep them with us. But if we don't, because, we don't just have boundless cages, we can transfer them to another zoo, wildlife center, or aquarium across the country.
Gotcha. And how many animals do you have at the Refuge at any one time?
So currently pending patients, ones that are at one stage of recovery or another, I think we've got close to 200 in our care now currently. Wow. Animal ambassadors, we have 5 animal ambassadors that are available for off-site educational programming as well as on-site educational programming.
And what type of animals are they?
We have Sheldon, our gopher tortoise. He came in July of 2015 after he was struck by a vehicle, and the vehicle subsequently dragged him. So unfortunately, he no longer has any nails. His hands were permanently damaged in the trauma, so he can't dig himself a new burrow. We have Bashful, our Virginia possum. He sustained some permanent head trauma when he was a youngster, and so he has permanent neurological damage and behavioral damage as well. And then we have 3 raptors, so birds of prey. Mina, our great horned owl, Talon, our red-tailed hawk, and Lola, our American kestrel, all of which are available in the Education Center during programs to view or during our Wildlife Walk hospital tour.
Wow. And so you take those take those animals to other places? I mean, give me an example of where they go. Is it
so they go to schools, they go to libraries, they go to events. We always do presentations at the Ding Darling Ding Days in October, and we bring over some of our ambassadors there. We go to Cape Coral Burrowing Owl Festival. We go to the Edison Festival of Lights educational outreach exhibit area. So we take them all over Southwest Florida, but predominantly Lee County.
Yeah. And I mean, it really is incredible the different types of animals that you got here. And you just said one there, the Cape Coral, the burrowing owl. When I first moved here, I remember seeing the burrowing owl, and it was on the. Is it still on the endangered list? I don't
yes,
know
it is still listed. So there are different listings within the Endangered Species Act, and they have recently, if I'm not mistaken, been uplisted. So they are more protected now than what they were in previous years.
And if there's any animal that needs protection, it's those, because they
really
do put themselves in a predicament when they pick their nesting.
Well, and it's not like they nest in trees like the other owls. They pick a hole in the ground near the road. So
exactly.
Of course they're at more.
And they stand at the top of the hole and then just duck down it and thinking they're going to be safe, which obviously doesn't work so well for them. But I'm glad to hear they're making a recovery. And what about endangered species on the island?
We definitely get quite an influx of sea turtles. Right now, I believe we just have one loggerhead sea turtle pending in our care. We recently, yesterday, released another loggerhead sea turtle on the Sanibel Lighthouse Beach. So
what was
it was in for brevetoxicosis or that red tide poisoning that the birds can get as well.
Gotcha.
So it was at our facility for between a month and 2 months.
It has to be there that long for.
Oh, absolutely. Really? Birds we can typically get detoxed and stabilized and re-released anywhere between 2 and 8 weeks, depending on how much of that toxin's in their system. Sea turtles will be there for months sometimes.
So for those that don't know, explain a little bit about red tide. Is it caused by the release of water, or
not necessarily? So red tide is a naturally occurring phenomena. It's a type of a marine plant, so a saltwater algae. Not all algae makes you sick, only particular types of algae do. But the algae, Karenia brevis, when it is in high enough quantities in the environment, when that algal bloom dies, the little dinoflagellate or bacterium within that algae produces a neurotoxin. Now, for neurotoxin, that affects your brainstem, your equilibrium, your balance, and so those are the parts of the body that it attacks. When exposed to those higher levels of toxins during certain times of the year, again, for us, it's typically between November and the end of April, birds at the beach will have those kind of dizzy, disoriented looking symptoms or appearances on the beach. But for sea turtles, because they are constantly exposed, if they're in that bloom area, they have more lethargy, or where they look very, very clinically tired, depressed, and they don't move around very much. And the other thing that sea turtles tend to exhibit a lot during that red tide overexposure is they get something we call bubble butt. So the buoyancy exchange within their coelom or their body cavity goes towards the end of their shell, and it causes their bottom to float up, their head to float down, and it makes it difficult for them to come up and breathe. So in addition
how
to
how are these being found? Is it fishermen? Are they coming onto the beach?
Absolutely.
Or is it offshore? I mean, where are they turning up?
A little bit of everything. So fishermen can find them when they're out fishing. Sometimes they wash ashore if they're just out there floating and they wait for the tidal currents to come in. So it's any number of things for sure.
Okay. And then, so any other species any other species that we didn't necessarily know about that maybe not quite so popular with the island residents? Or, I mean, is there? I mean, you know, obviously we've got magnificent animals on this island, but
absolutely.
Explain a few of the lesser known ones that you don't see all the time.
Well, I mean, I know that people tend to have a bittersweet relationship with them, but I happen to love possums. So yeah, possums, you know, people see them when they're, you know, playing dead, or where they're opening their mouth or drooling, or they're, you know, stinking. It's people just see them in their garbage and they just kind of associate them with a lot of negative disposition or negative opinions. But possums, believe it or not, they have a whole lot of human health as well as environmental health benefits. They eat thousands of ticks in a year, so they help prevent Lyme's disease. They have a very, very strong resistance to the rabies virus because their body temperature is so low, and they also have a very strong resistance to pit viper venom. So there's actually a couple of universities that are attempting at this point to try and make snake bite medicine for people from possums.
Wow. Do we get pit vipers here?
Not on the island. So in Florida, there's about 46 different species of snakes, 6 of which are venomous. Down here in the Lee County area, we only get about 35 of those species of snakes and only 4 of the 6 venomous snakes. And I believe per Chris Lekowitz, the director of habitat management at SCCF and the herpetologist there, he says we haven't had a documented, you know, established venomous snake population, I think, in close to 30 years. So the likelihood of you actually seeing a venomous snake on Sanibel is very, very slim.
They're here, or they're just not coming into contact with humans, or they're not here?
They're not on Sanibel. They haven't been on Sanibel in a few decades.
Gotcha.
The snakes that we tend to see are like the black racers, the yellow rat snakes, like hanging out in the trees.
Harmless.
Yes, absolutely.
And have we had any issues with the like the Everglades with the python releases?
No, as far as I know, I have not heard, at least through Florida Fish and Wildlife, of any established Burmese pythons that have made it to the island yet.
Okay.
But they've made it up to Naples, so we're hoping that, you know, they don't make it up to us, but we'll be prepared.
So there is an ongoing program in the Everglades at the moment to try and get rid of...
Yes. So invasive species, animals or plants even that were introduced into an area by people are very harmful to local flora and fauna as well as to the Florida economy. Last year, I think the state spent millions of dollars to try and get rid of invasive plants and animals. So they are not only affecting our wildlife and our habitats, but they're also affecting our pockets.
So we've had a big cleanup on the island here with the what was the Australian, was it pine? What was it? The
Australian pines?
No, what was it they were trying to get rid of? Red pepper. Brazilian pepper. Yes,
Brazilian pepper.
Brought in to combat erosion, and then basically ended up taking over the island. Correct. They spent a lot of years trying to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. And then what other?
Oh, you mean the iguanas? Yeah.
So there's iguana. Is there iguana issues?
There's iguanas here. There's Cuban night anoles that were brought over from.
What are they?
Cuban night anoles, they're a smaller lizard than an iguana, but they're larger than your regular little lizards that you see walking around. They got brought over with Hurricane Charlie debris.
Really?
Yeah. So sometimes invasive species aren't necessarily introduced intentionally by people, but people are the reason why they're here predominantly.
Right. And is there any issue now where they're focusing their efforts on? as far as invasive species, or
particularly the state,
on the island in general? Is there anything that's...
Well, I know that SCCF, I believe, helps collect cane toads every now and then, because cane toads are a huge problem. They have glands on the back of their necks called parotid glands that actually secrete a toxin when the animal is agitated. And so if people, when they're out walking their dogs or they let them out to go to the bathroom, they can make dogs and cats very, very sick.
Right.
So,
and that was why I was asking. Not, I'm sure it's not really in your department, so to speak, but I was just getting at that particular reason.
Yes.
Are you seeing, injuries to animals, or, from invasive species or anything like that?
Yes. So definitely, I would say probably the biggest challenge that animals that we treat and release back out into the wild that they're facing right now is habitat destruction. Okay. And that's habitat destruction from people. That's habitat destruction from invasive species. It's just, they have a lot of things that aren't necessarily measuring in their favor, which is why we're so very happy that our team at Crow can be of help and assistance to these animals, because for us, the work that we do not just affects the individuals, but we also help affect healthier populations. And in many ways, the health of the wildlife also directly affects the health of our environment and humans as well. Gotcha.
And then, so how many patients are admitted each year? I know you said...
But between 3,500 to 4,000, although last year we had sort of an influx. So I think our final count was about 4,236.
That's incredible.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
Incredible.
But less than 20% of those come from the islands. The bulk of the animals that we care for actually come from the mainland and the remainder parts of Lee County.
Really?
People on the island are very, very conscientious about our local wildlife here.
Wow. So they're coming from elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Cape Coral, Greater Fort Myers, Lehigh Acres, Estero, Pine Island, all the other parts of Lee County.
I had no idea that actually serviced the whole of Lee County.
We service the whole of Lee County.
Wow. That's incredible. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the strangest animals that you get into the hospital.
I mean, strange is kind of a relative term, because in Florida you get, potentially like thousands of different types of plants and animals that go through our state, but definitely some more of the kind of interesting or bigger megafauna that we get in is going to be sea turtles and bald eagles. In fact, Crow is the only licensed sea turtle hospital from Sarasota down to the Florida Keys in between on this coast. So if there's a sea turtle, in the few counties, they're coming to us.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Other than red tide, we get quite a few sea turtles that come in from boat and propeller strikes as well. And then we get in quite a bit of bald eagles, too. And in fact, Florida has the second highest population of bald eagles in the entire country, only second to Alaska. So we get them, pretty much year round, but predominantly during nesting season. Okay. The males are out there, their hormones are raging, and they're fighting with each other for territory and for a mate. And so...
And then, so any of the animals that you get into the hospital, do you end up tagging them, or...?
So currently, the animals that are tagged regularly by our facility are going to be sea turtles. They get both a flipper tag as well as a pit tag, which sort of identifies them in the future. That way, if they come into our facility or another one, we'll be able to provide some form of a medical history. Because for our other animals, once we release them, they're on their own. So we just provide them with, the medical or supportive care they need. But as soon as they show us that they're fully functioning, they can fly, they can swim, they can forage and do everything they need to, they're on their own.
Gotcha.
And because so few of them come from the island, we're not worried about them necessarily, coming back to Crow. Mm-hmm.
So if you did come across a sea turtle that was that is entwined in fishing line or something like that, is that something that you should try and attempt to do yourself if you're out on a boat, or would you recommend?
Well, I would definitely recommend, if you ever find an animal that's ADR, what we would consider ain't doing right, you give us a call first, because we will be able to go through that step-by-step assessment with you. And in most situations, we do feel confident that people can assist with the rescue and transportation of animals, but at times, depending on the severity of the issue, we would feel that it is better to have one of our trained volunteers or staff to come obtain the animal from you.
Gotcha. And tell me a little bit about the webcams that you have.
So within our education center, as well as on our website, we have 5 live feed cameras, one of which is in our intake room when the animals first arrive for initial triage. We have 4 in the outside cages: the pelican enclosure, the mammal enclosure, which houses our raccoons, the otter cage, which is always a fairly popular camera, and then our large flight where all the eagles and ospreys and falcons go.
Fantastic.
And even if you're not in the education center, if you log onto our website at www.crowclinic.org, you can click on the link to our live feed cameras at no cost to you and see crow in action.
Very cool. Very cool. And then you have some wildlife walks that you do, is
Absolutely.
that right?
So if people who come through the education center, or if they want to learn more about crow on an intimate level, they can sign up for one of our wildlife walk hospital tours. So for a little bit of an extra fee, but added value, you not only get to go through the visitor education center and sit in on one of our daily presentations, but you also get a guided tour of the hospital by by myself or by one of the other staff members at Crow.
Oh, that's cool.
While during the wildlife walk, it kind of gives you that in-depth into the treatment process. So although you're going down to the hospital, we don't necessarily put our patients on display. So what you would potentially be seeing would be like a surgery or a bandage change, a force feeding, a medication. So you really learn about what it takes for us to get these animals back to full, back to full mobility and full to function, as we call it.
All right, so I'm sure you're very busy at what you're doing at the hospital.
Absolutely.
Do you have openings for volunteers?
Sure. So, because including myself, Crow only has a paid staff of about 17 people. That's a mixture of full-time and part-time positions down at the hospital, as well as up in the admin area. So for us, volunteers are a very crucial part of what we do. At Crow, we have anywhere between 150 to 200 active volunteers throughout the year.
Wow.
And last year combined, they donated more than 23,000 hours.
That's insane. So,
and we're always looking for help.
Yeah. So and give me an idea of what sort of things they'd be doing on a daily basis.
So volunteers do have to commit to a 3-month minimum term. It doesn't matter what time of the year, as long as they can kind of, dedicate that chunk of time.
Is that because of the amount of time in training?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So they complete an application, they go through an orientation, and after the training with one of our master volunteers, you're considered an onboarded member of our team. Volunteer jobs can range from general patient care, baby bird feeding is an especially popular one during this time of the year with the ladies. There's gopher tortoise grazing, there's diet preparation, there's rehab. If you're not into the whole animal care side of it, there's also administrative duties. You can assist us at events, you can deliver presentations, or you can even be a docent in our education center.
Oh, very cool. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So tell me one other thing I want to know. Can you give our listeners any inside information about things that they might not necessarily know or expect with the hospital? I mean, is there behind the scenes or something that you would
So definitely, if the viewers or the listeners ever get a chance to join us for one of our Wildlife Walk hospital tours, there's no way to truly prepare for it, because as we're an emergency hospital, you never know what's going to be inside. One day, a group of individuals might see a gopher tortoise shell repair, and other days they might see us tube feeding some baby possums. So it's always good to keep your mind open and take in the fact that it really does take all of us working together to make this happen, whether it's feeding the baby bunnies or doing an orthopedic repair on a bald eagle. So
right. Okay, interesting. All right, so I've got a question for you personally.
Sure.
You live locally in the area.
Yes.
And you're on the islands all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like to do outside of Crow? What do you like to do? What would you recommend somebody doing if they were visiting the islands? What would you say would be your favourite thing to do outside of work, as it were?
Well, I feel like I'm always working. But if you have not yet had the opportunity, Sanibel is wholeheartedly about conservation. Getting outside is definitely one of my preferences. All the restaurants are really great, but go through the tram tour at the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. If you're wanting to learn about some more of the shells, the best place for that would definitely be the Bailey Matthews National Shell Museum. And if you're wanting to do some biking trails, I would recommend going through one of SCCF's trails. There's so many wonderful natural places on the island, and it's kind of hard to pick one because you work at one, but you feel like you're involved in all of them to some greater or lesser degree.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Totally. Okay, so there is one thing that we ask all out, because you are an island lady, so there's one thing that we ask everybody to do.
Okay. Oh God.
And this is what is it, Laurie? It's a queen conch shell. Okay. So you got to see if you can give me a note out of it. We're going to do it together.
Okay.
Have you ever done it?
No.
Here we go. Let's give it a go. Ready? Come on, give it again. You got to go. Excellent. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thanks for coming out.
You.
Appreciate it. Very interesting. Till next time, thanks very much. Thanks for listening to the Insider's Guide to the Islands. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.